Manchester City 2, Bournemouth 1. But for so long in this game, it was looking like it was not going to be the ideal start for the new Manchester City boss. Hello, my name is Mark Donaldson alongside Mark Ogden and Stevie Nicol. There's so many ways we could approach this one. Stevie, let's start with the easy one to begin with. The scoreline, Manchester City getting all 3 points. Did they deserve it before we get into everything that happened?
100%. No question. Dominated the game. Bournemouth did what they do. They're great on the break, and then in the first half in particular, they looked dangerous. But they got nullified in the second half and offered nothing going forward. As you said, there's a lot of ways to look at this, but if you look at the bare facts, the fact that Erling Haaland isn't 100% sharp and fit, otherwise he's got 2 goals. Gahey scored. He should have had 2 as well. I mean, I'm sitting watching the game, and at 1-0 with 10, 12 minutes to go, I'm thinking, teams that are going for the title, these are the games that they win. You can't always play great, you can't always score loads of goals, but when you dominate a game so much and you don't win, I don't remember too many teams that win the Premier League that do that. And then 10 minutes later, the whole narrative has changed. So the City we saw last week to the City we saw today has totally changed my narrative. Last week I thought this team's miles away. Today, after what happened, the way they dominated the game, the way they pulled themselves out of it, you're like, this team can absolutely get better. And if they can do this to Bournemouth, who, by the way, are in Europe, were in, top 6 last year? So, yeah, I think this was an eye-opener, certainly for me, because I kind of fell in the trap of what they produced last week against Arsenal, which was, I was scratching my head. I'm not thinking that right now, can I assure you.
Yeah, it was a strange one, Augie, wasn't it? Because let's start with the team selection from Enzo Maresca, and that raised a few eyebrows. We're trying to work out before kickoff who's playing where, who's going to play midfield. It ended up being Mark Gahey in there. Gvardiol and Lewis were advanced. O'Reilly was pretty much Haaland's strike partner, but 6 defenders in there. And the irony is that City won this because of someone on the bench, Ryan Cherky, who scored 2 goals. What did you make of it when you saw this lineup?
Well, it was a bit strange, obviously. I mean, look, we know that City are still in for midfielders. They're going to, I think Bouadi will be done in the next 24 to 48 hours. So obviously playing Mark Gray midfield is not something you want to do on a permanent basis because he's a centre-half who's not very good with his feet. So the last thing you want is to have him in midfield. I think that showed today. But obviously, you've got Mateo Kovacic on the bench. So they did have a midfielder there, which made it a bit more strange in the sense that, why put a centre-half in midfield when you've got a midfielder who's played that position all his career? But still, it didn't really work, and they got off the hook in the end by winning the game. But I think it tells me that Maresca wants more players in. It also tells you how many players City have lost this year. Rodri's gone, John Stones has gone, Bernardo Silva's gone, Kevin De Bruyne went a year ago. They have had a massive kind of overhaul in the centre of the pitch. So it's still a work in progress. Elliot Anderson, for me, just because he's a £120 million sign doesn't mean he's a £120 million player. And I think you saw his limitations today. I think he's I don't know what Stevie thinks, but I think he's a midfielder that just is happy just to give and go and not do much else. I think he lacks a bit of personality. And I think, maybe City need a more dynamic midfielder alongside him to make it work. But yeah, right now the options that are available to Maresca aren't great. But like Stevie said, they won the game, and that's the main thing. But you can't carry on like this with that sort of midfield. And if they get Enzo Fernandez as well, Enzo Fernandez, Bouadi, Elliot Anderson, then you've got a different perspective. But still, I don't think any of those players are better than what they've lost.
To answer your question, Augie, you think of Rodri, and then you think Elliot Anderson today. There's no comparison.
No, I mean, I think we saw this in the World Cup as well. Elliot Anderson, he divides opinion. I think I'm amazed at his valuation, really. I think he's a neat and tidy player, but Rodri was neat and tidy, but he had this gear going forward where he could make things happen. He scored the goal in the Champions League final, didn't he? Rodri's a world-class, he's a Ballon d'Or winner. Elliot Anderson is, we'll remember.
He breaks things up. Elliot Anderson, he breaks things up, he gets it, and then he gives it. He's not going to be a guy who's going to do what Cherky did for the Gvardiol goal. he's not going to be splitting defences. He's a guy who's going to work all day for you. He gets around. He wins it back. I mean, he does a fantastic job. But in terms of a football player, he's not on the same level as Rodri. No way.
I mean, midfielders nowadays, they do half a job, don't they? They either do the defensive part or they do the box-to-box part. They don't do both. The days of the Roy Keanes, the Patrick Vieira's, the Graham Souness, the players that would go box-to-box, do everything. They could tackle, they could create, they could score goals. They seem to kind of break the role up now. And Elliot Anderson's a classic player that does half of that job rather than the full job.
Do you know, at the same time, I think he's a good signing for City because City have got so many hybrid players. I mean, you got Rico Lewis at fullback. He's not a fullback. They bring a substitute on Nunes at fullback. He's not a fullback either. Guardiola was a centre back. He's playing left. But I mean, City have got so many hybrid players that I guess Elliot Anderson actually is one of those guys they have that you know exactly what his job is and you know what he's going to do and he's going to do it well and it's not flashy, but you can rely on it. As opposed to today, Rico Lewis. The reason he lost the goal is Rico Lewis has absolutely no idea there's a player behind him. And that's what happens when you try and play somebody, what you would term out of position. So yeah, and it just sounded as though we were a bit harsh on Anderson. It's not his fault that he was over 100 million. But at the end of the day, he's an important cog and he will be an important cog for City. But again, he's just not Rodri.
I just want another look at this starting lineup to say what you've both said about players playing out of position. Phil Foden played on the right. He doesn't normally play there. Nico O'Reilly doesn't normally play as advanced. Semenyo's preferred position is left. Guehi's a centre-back. As Stevie mentioned, Gvardiol's a centre-back. That's also a very good left-back. And Rico Lewis isn't a right-back. So I think that kind of sums up the chat so far about this City lineup is going to look very, very different in a few weeks' time once the transfer window closes. Stevie touched upon something right at the start, and that was Erling Haaland's miss. Look, the rust. He's not long back. Have break. You'd put your house on him to score them. How does it take, Stevie, from when you return from pre-season training or when you return from your summer holidays to getting that sharpness that you really feel, yeah, this is where I want to be? Because it doesn't appear it's long enough yet for Haaland.
I mean, listen, generally your pre-season's 45. To get from start to finish and start your pre-season to be where you're sharp, I would suggest 5 weeks. If you have a good break. Obviously he didn't have a whole break, a normal summer, so it should be a little less. But at the end of the day, when you are Erling Haaland and you are expected to put those chances, listen, he's a world-class finisher. And a world-class finisher should have had 2 goals today. He absolutely is not sharp in his head because he didn't make a decision. That's why it ends up hitting him in the chest. Because normally Erling Haaland has already decided where the flight of the ball is, where it's going to come down, where he's going to make contact with it, where he's going to put it. When you're sharp and ready, all of these things are already done before you make the strike. And none of them were in play. That's why it looks so awkward that it hits him in the chest. Because his brain's not in tune yet. Certainly with the rest of his body, which probably isn't in tune to a top-class striker yet anyway. So, yeah. But you've just got to deal with these things, though. You have to deal with these things. And Man City dealt with them because they won the game. And they made the changes. And I agree with what you said about, I think in a couple of weeks' time, this team might look, in terms of the names on the jersey and the positions, completely different. Because I think Maresca is figuring out what is the best thing for his team. And in the meantime, he has to deal with players that are not 100% fit, but he still has to play them. And he's dealing with players that he maybe isn't 100% sure where they're best at. And I think that's definitely what he's thinking with Foden. I don't think there's a better player in the Premier League who plays with a back to goal, who receives a pass with the facing the opposite way, who in a split second is all of a sudden going straight to goal. I don't think there's a better player in the Premier League. So that for me means you've got to play Foden through the middle. And you've got to give him a chance. I don't think he's at his best in the wide areas. Yes, he's a fantastic player, but you've got to play him through the middle. So yeah, I didn't get that one playing Nico O'Reilly through the middle and Foden wide. But again, I think Maresca hasn't decided on his best 11. He hasn't decided on who's best where. So in order to put a team on the field today after last week, no question, completely overran Bournemouth in terms of possession. Just didn't quite at the sharpest in the final third, but still win the game. I mean, these are all great signs for me.
Yeah, that's a good habit to have. And they could have won it a lot more comfortably. You look at 2 goals in the last 6 minutes. City scraped by. They didn't. They had loads of chances, and those chances will be taken as the season goes on. For those of you that are into your expected goals, yeah, I mean, Bournemouth had 1 or 2 opportunities. And Augie, let's have a look at their goal, because I thought it was a really nice move in the 26th minute. It's finished off by Marcus Tavernier, and as Stevie quite rightly said, Rico Lewis is in no man's land, and he's nowhere near Tavernier. But rewind a fair chunk of this, because Adam Smith plays it forward. This is after some brave possession at the back, some good play. City's defence is all over the place, and 2 defenders go for it and get confused. They bang into each other. Evan Nielsen does well, sends it out to Ryan. He puts the ball in, and there's Tavernier at the back post. From a Bournemouth perspective, it's a brilliant goal. From the City perspective, it's a horrible goal to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic Bournemouth goal, isn't it? Certainly from the last 2 years, they break very quickly. They're very good at the counter-attack, and they took advantage. So that wasn't a surprise what Bournemouth did. But you're right, centre-half, bumping into each other. And I think that comes from the uncertainty of the positions. Like you say, you've got a centre-half playing midfield. You've got 2 centre-halves who are probably not quite used to playing each other this season. So there's something about City that isn't quite convincing. But saying that, this win today was a better win than Arsenal's against Coventry, because, City have had to show resilience. They've had to show resolve. They've had to find a way to win against a very good team in Bournemouth who, they hadn't lost since January. Arsenal beat a promoted Coventry side. So, we've had 1 game in the season, so they shouldn't even be showing league tables yet, but they are doing, obviously. But I think if you look at the manner of the win, the fact that City were able to get this win today means more to me than Arsenal cruising to a 3-0 win against Coventry on Friday night, because we already knew what Arsenal could do. That was Arsenal at their best, at their strongest, with everyone playing, everyone fit. This is City with, square pegs in round holes, Mark Gay midfield, and they still beat a Bournemouth side. So, if we're talking about the good signs, the positive signs for City from today, it's the fact they've won this game and they still, level at the top of the table with Arsenal after 1 game.
It's the manner of the win. That's what it is. And that kind of, oh no, we're going to lose at home. Haven't lost for, I think it's back-to-back games for 25 years in the Premier League. Bournemouth, by the way, hadn't lost since January, since they sold Semenyo to Manchester City. So that record is gone. City should have been back on level terms, Stevie. 52 minutes on the watch, 7 minutes into the second half. The corner comes in. You scored many goals with your head in your career. What's he done wrong? Mark Gahey.
Put it wide. Well, I think, to be honest, during the commentary, I think the commentator got it spot on. I think he has just tried to guide it, and instead of just fully heading it off the meat of the bat, busting the back of the net with it, he's just tried to cushion it off his head, and he's just slightly misjudged it. And because of that, he's put it wide. I think it's as simple as that.
The game was probably won with the substitutions, Augie. And Nunez has come on in the 57th minute for Rico Lewis. There was maybe some surprise that no changes were made or tweaks were made at half-time. But it's the double change in 63. Not so much Elliot Anderson getting hurt. Hopefully he's okay. And oncoming Kovacic. But Ryan Cherky coming on for Nico O'Reilly. And there were a lot of options as to who could have gone off and what could have been done. But Cherky came on and he just looked so lively right from the start. And he's got that in his locker. He's one of these players. He can be unplayable. And ultimately, he's the game changer in this one, but he didn't start the game. Yeah,
well, the thing with Cherky is he's one of those players that managers will have to either trust him to start or trust him to finish. And I think the situation with Cherky is that, does he have the same impact when he starts games? I'm not sure he does. I'm not sure he's got that discipline at times to make the impact that he does when he comes on. Now, when he comes off the bench after an hour, he's coming on against a team that's probably tired a little bit. He's up against a direct opponent who's probably had 60, 70 minutes under his belt. So he can take advantage of the fatigue and he's fresh and he can pick holes. I just don't know if he's a player that certainly Maresca will trust to start from the start. Guardiola didn't. Pep had his moments with Cherki where I think eventually it was like 60-40 in favour of Cherki, but there were times when Pep was not very trusting him. And I think whether Cherki's prepared to accept the fact that he might be an impact sub, I don't think he will be happy to accept that. But I think at the moment that's his best role, because if you start Cherki, he has to be able to put the defensive side of the game, and he has to track back. He has to do more than just he does when he comes on as a substitute. So brilliant as he is, I don't think he's a player who can start the games right now.
Equalising goal, Stevie, in the 84th minute. Typical, isn't it? How many times do you see it? How often do you see the player misses the easier chance but scores the harder chance? And Guéhi makes amends for his poor header in the 52nd minute. It's a brilliant delivery. What did you like about this goal?
Well, to be honest, it's hard for me to get away from the fact that from the minute the corner was taken to the second that it hit him right in the middle of the bat on his forehead, there was never a Bournemouth player near him. It was absolutely scandalous. And as much as he relaxed on the first one that he put wide, he didn't do that on this one. He absolutely 100% concentrated on it, went for the power, only had eyes for the ball. It did take a little flick off a defender, which meant the goalkeeper had no chance. He probably wouldn't have saved it anyway had it not come off the defender. But it's difficult not to point a finger at Bournemouth and say, how does Mark Guéhi, who already has had a clear header, generally on the field of play, somebody will go, that the first one's a wake-up call. So the second one is just embarrassing from a defensive point of view. The fact that nobody was near him ever. From the start to the finish of the corner, not one Bournemouth player got even close to him. And that made it so much easier for him. But yeah, credit to him. He learned from the first one and he made sure he got a good contact on it, and it was in the back of the net.
And then the winning goal. And it's a beautiful through ball by Cherki. The flag goes up after Gvardiol puts the ball in the back of the net, but it goes up wrongly. But this just isn't a 2 or 3 pass move. Look at all the players involved in this, Augie, and it's a brilliant finish from a centre-back playing at left-back, playing as a striker to try and get them a goal. And do you know what? If the flag doesn't go up, there's absolute sheer joy all over the Etihad. But then when the goal's given after the flag goes up, it's like, yes, we've scored. It's times like these, and I know VAR gets things right, but it's times like these that you just want the natural enthusiasm of a goal scored, linesman goes back to the halfway, and I'm using the term linesman because it's old school, and everybody celebrates. And it was just something taken out of that, albeit City won't really care.
Yeah, I don't think the City fans were bothered, to be honest. I think they're just happy to win the game. So 92, 93 minutes. If you get a VAR decision in your favour, you take it, don't you? But it's interesting, that graphic you showed us then of the sequence before the goal. And I think that shows you the difference that Cherki makes, because, remember the Conference League final when Cole Palmer basically took the game by the scruff of his hands and said he was basically sick of all the sideways passing, because that's what one thing Maresca's team do. They kind of pass sideways. Cole Palmer stepped up and made a difference. I think on this occasion, lots of sideways passing, tippy-tappy passing. Cherki steps up, finds the pass, they score the goal. So that's why you need a player of his calibre, of his kind of vision in a team like Maresca's Man City team or even the Chelsea team, because there are times when you're watching Maresca's teams where it is all a bit side to side. So, and then it gets back to whether he trusts Cherki or not. But Cherki delivered today with that killer pass for the goal, which turned a point into 3 points and meant that Maresca started his first game as City manager with a win, because I know it's ridiculous, but there are City fans that I know of that are not quite sold on Maresca. They don't like his football. He's not Pep. They got hammered last week. So had they not won today, the pressure would have already started to tell. So it's a massive win from Maresca just from that point of view.
So let me ask you a question here. Why did the linesman put his flag up?
Because he thought he was offside.
Well, there you go. James. So all these people who talk about VAR, by the way, if ever there was a rubber stamp on VAR, today was the day. Because before VAR, that would have cost Man City 2 points. So it really gets on my goat when people start talking about VAR and all the joy and all this. Well, number one, Guardiola, for a start, wasn't sure whether he was onside or not. Because in the 90th minute, when you score a goal to win a game, the first thing in your brain is going mental. And he didn't go mental. He sees the flag. He thought he was offside as well. And the fact that the linesman put his flag up, again, is a rubber stamp for VAR, because that would cost Man City 2 points.
Let me give you the other. Let me give you the other side of that. This isn't against VAR. VAR did its job here. This is against the assistant referee, because when we see the lines, Hill is clearly playing him onside. You've got one job as an assistant, and that's to raise your flag.
Saying that, Mark, as if the linesmen never make mistakes. They make mistakes.
No, I get that. I get that. No, this is nothing against VAR. VAR has done its job here, but the assistant referee hasn't done his job. Bottom line is
a safety net, because he thinks, right, well, I'll put it up. I thought it was offside, but VAR is going to check anyway. And the difference, had there been no VAR, he might not have put the flag up, because I think they all know there that it's just a kind of it's almost like a traffic light, isn't it? That's the red light, and then VAR is at the green light.
But again, you're doubling down, because that actually makes my argument better, because the linesman doesn't really know.
True.
So how many decisions over 100 years of football, you've got a linesman who doesn't really know, and is just do it, put it up or not.
So Stevie's arguing for more VAR.
VAR got it right.
Hey,
VAR's the reason that City got 2
Thomas,
points.
no, I didn't. No, I'm not. That's the Dan Thomas line, if I've ever heard one.
What did they learn, finally, Stevie? What did Maresca learn? The one thing above all else, while experimenting, because it was with Gahey in midfield, to get a win. What was the biggest thing you learned today, Maresca?
No, he learned that his team, regardless of whether it's going well or not, or things are going for them or going against them, are going to keep going, and they're capable of pulling something out of the fire. And that's huge. You know, when you're sat on the bench and there's 10 minutes to go and you're getting beat, when you've got a team that you're thinking, you're looking around and you're thinking, who's going to do something here, and you don't feel it. That's a horrible place to be. But when you're sitting there going, you know what, there's still 10 minutes. We can actually still do this. That's a huge difference in the way that you feel. But actually now the players know they can do it as well, which is even more important. Never mind the guys sat on the bench. The players on the field, every time you do that type of thing, it just reinforces you keep going and you believe and you trust and all of those things. So yeah, this in some very strange ways a good way for Man City to win this game today, because they take an awful lot out of it, an awful lot of good things out of it.
Huge for City and the manner of the victory. They thoroughly deserved it with the chances that they missed. But to do so, having been a goal down and scored twice in the last 6 minutes, that'll feel really good for Enzo Maresca. Full time at the Etihad, Manchester City 2, Bournemouth 1. Bye for now.